I would like to introduce our first speaker who'll be talking about everybody's favorite lazy boys, sloths in the planetarium. So, Joe Childers from the Boonshoft Museum, please take it away.
Okay, so we have a sloth at the Boonshoft Museum, and we put the sloth in the planetarium, and everybody goes wild. So what I'm going to be talking about today is how Stephanie and Patience and I have come up with a surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, successful public outreach. So, where did this idea come from? Well, it started off, I realized that our planetarium has more capital expense than any other place in our museum, and also our dome is empty more than most other venues in our museum. So I was trying to think of ways that we could be indispensable to other departments. We understand that we drive attendance, but still. So I started collaborating with our education department, which I used to be a member of, and we had two programs. One was about fireflies, because I'd made a Digistar script that simulates fireflies, and then they would do a luminol chemistry experiment. And then we had another one with spectrum tubes. So the astronomy angle of that, and then you can pass out the glasses and the room can get dark. So those went really well. And so I thought to myself, well, what about an animal? We do have an accredited zoo on site. It's not large, but it's not non-existent either. So I approached Stephanie with this idea. And it didn't go over nearly as well as I thought it would. And it turns out that when I thought that Stephanie was reluctant or just cool on the idea and being polite, instead, she was juggling lots of things that I just had not anticipated in her mind. And so next, we're going to have Stephanie and Patience. Stephanie, is going to talk about the thought process and what her perspective on bringing a live animal into a planetarium is. So Stephanie is our curator of live animals, and she is she's a fierce advocate for animals, and she loves her own animals, and I think that will come through in this.
All right, hello, my name is Stephanie. I'm the curator of live animals here at the Boonshoft Museum, and I have Patience with me today. And Patience today lives two fingered sloth. And my kid seems like sloths are going viral. Everybody loves sloths. Everybody wants to come and see Patience the sloth. But here at the museum, Patience sleeps most of the day. She sleeps about 14 hours a day, usually up about 10 hours a night. So a lot of our visitors, even if they come to the museum weekly, they only see her moving maybe once in a blue moon. It's pretty rare to see her up and moving about during the daytime. And jokingly, Joe in our astronomy department came to me and said, we should do some kind of animal program in the planetarium. So I thought about all the animals that we have for education. Most of the animals that we use for education are smaller. And the planetarium is a pretty big space. So a small animal like a ferret or something like that wouldn't really show up well in the planetarium. People wouldn't really be able to see it very well. But sloths have been super popular. Patience does really great with small groups of people. So she's not an animal that we can normally bring out for school kids, normal visitors at the museum. She doesn't like large crowds or very loud groups, especially kids can be a little scary to her sometimes. So I thought the planetarium would be a great place to do a sloth program where people can't touch Patience. So Patience is up at the front of the planetarium. We have stanchions set up. People can come up and see Patience at the very end of the program, but they're not allowed to touch her. And for Patience, that makes her a lot more comfortable that she has some distance between herself and the visitors. And also for our visitors, it's a really great opportunity for them to see Patience actually up and moving around when she comes out on her stand in the planetarium. So what we did is we went ahead and found some kind of rainforesty type pictures and things like that to enhance the program. We say that we transform the planetarium into a virtual rainforest, and then Patience comes out and people are able to see her up close and learn a little bit more about her. And rainforests are in big trouble right now, so we thought it would be a great opportunity for us to raise awareness about rainforests and conservation, especially for sloths, and also a great opportunity for us to get people to come into the museum to see Patience, because we have a lot of people that will come to the museum almost just to see Patience. People are crazy about sloths, and those planetarium programs have been really, really successful in promoting Patience, promoting our zoo, and also promoting conservation as well. So it's been an amazing animal to bring out in our planetarium as far as safety goes. Some of our animals would not be safe to bring out in the planetarium. They might try to run off into the audience, and it is a big space, so some animals we would be concerned about. But patients, luckily, sloths, she doesn't have a branch to grab onto, she's not going anywhere. So it works really well to bring her stand out in the planetarium. We just make sure that she doesn't have the ability to grab onto any overhanging bars or walls or anything like that. But she's one of our best animals to bring out since she's slow and she's not really going anywhere anytime soon. She's pretty slow. So with the planetarium program, we thought it would be a way to raise some money for conservation. So we have been collecting donations through the Sloth Conservation Foundation, and so far, Patience has raised about $300 to help sloths in the wild. So our animals here in the zoo, we keep them here to keep them nice and safe and also educate people about the animals, but we also want to be helping their cousins in the wild as well. So Patience has been a great ambassador, a great way for us to raise money for conservation of wild sloths in the wild. So Patience has been a real rock star. It's been a great program for us. As people can see her up moving around, she's one of our largest animals, so she works really well in the planetarium so people can actually see her. When Joe and I first started talking about this, one of his concerns was they just got brand new carpet in the planetarium. He asked me if she's going to poop on his carpet. And Patience is one of the cleanest animals here at the museum, so she only poops about once a week or so. So with about 99.9% certainty, I told Joe she will not poop on her carpet. She only poops about once a week, so it'd be pretty rare for her to poop while she's out for her planetarium program. So she's been a great hit, a great way to raise conservation awareness for our guests. And like I said, people do get to come up, see her up close and personal, and we've had lots of people, members that come here to the museum all the time that have never seen her face. So it's a great opportunity for people to see Patience up close and personal, awake, and learn a little bit more about her.
So this was the lesson that I learned. This was the lesson that I learned, that it's the animal that is running the program and we're just there to make it happen. And so let's recap some of the things that Stephanie had talked about in her video. So she's worried about the animal getting stressed. Patience is good with small groups, maybe not so much with large groups. And so that was one of the concerns that she had that led to her initial reluctance. Is it going to try to escape? Well, she explained why sloths are not going to try to escape. But she had horror stories of trying to chase it, for instance, a ferret through all of our fixed chairs in the dome. Will it draw a crowd? Yeah, not a problem. But let's say that you had a planetarium program on the tree frog, and yeah, that's not going to go over very well. But sloths, they do pretty well. Will the audience be able to see it? So our dome is a 50-foot dome, and we do have stanchions at the front, but that does take up most of our chair-free area, keeping some distance from patients. So this is the one program where the front seats fill up first, but Patience is large enough that you can see her. And lastly, all of the animals, especially the ones that are the animal ambassadors, the ones that can be taken out of their enclosures, they are all under a training regimen. And in fact, Stephanie is an expert trainer. That's how she started at the museum. And so whether this impacts the training makes a big difference. So that's what she's thinking about. Now here's what I'm thinking about. Lighting. Of course, this is no different than any other time when you have a live presenter with dome content. People don't understand that the contrast isn't like the ones that we have for a conference center contrast. And so what we ended up doing was we had the green lights around, we had the rainforest all dome like that you saw, and we've since updated that one with one that we borrowed from a Star Wars. So we now meet the sloth on Dagobah, but whatever, it looks the same. And then we dim the lights at the front of the dome when she wants to show graphics of some sort. Now, I was mostly joking when I was talking about that, but only mostly. And it's a concern. I mean, the animal keeper is going to leave, and you're still going to have the stain on your carpet, so there is that. And then we're all familiar with this. Oh, hey, I've got a great idea. I've got this great idea, and this one, and this one, and this one. And Stephanie's been pretty good about that, but you know what I'm talking about here. So, patience is like the perfect animal for this sort of thing. Will it get stressed? No, and in fact, she's getting used to crowds more and more, and this has been a real help in that. Will it try to escape? No, and who can't outrun a sloth anyway? Will it draw a crowd? Next question. Will the audience be able to see it? Now, the size of patience is about identical to the size of the hotel pillows that we have. So when she's on her stand, which would be about anywhere from this height to this height, everybody can see her. Will its training be undermined? Actually, Stephanie was trying to get her more comfortable with larger groups. And so this worked great. You might be thinking to yourself, well, that's nice for you, Mr. Accredited Zoo on Site. You can go walk 200 feet and watch a sloth do nothing whenever you're stressed. Well, it turns out that almost all of you are certain to have somebody in your community that's doing animal outreach. And they would probably love to get the publicity boost that doing a program at the planetarium would entail. And in the same way, you can get the publicity boost of being able to advertise that, for instance, a hawk from the rehabilitation center is going to be in our dome, or the canine police dogs are to come here. These are some of the things that I thought of, and perhaps you have other things that you can think of. So, in sum, I think that this is something that you can do even if you don't have a sloth. And it can be a good way for you to collaborate with other nonprofit organizations in your community. So here are a couple more of our pictures from it. This here illustrates how close the people can get. So the stanchion, there's the stanchion right there. And this is the same stand that you saw in the video. Do you have any questions or comments?
So normally I'd run around the room to help with Q&A, but this is kind of a weird room to run in, so please just raise your hand if you have a question. Oh, all right, perfect. Any questions? I guess sloths are just that straightforward.
We got one.
Oh, there we go.
And if nobody else has questions, I have a question for the audience.
How long have you had this sloth?
We have had this sloth for approximately 3 years. Does that sound right, Sherry? 3 years. So Patience is the result of a breeding program within AZA, the Zoos and Aquariums Accreditation. And so even though this species of sloth is least concern in the wild, there is still a breeding program, and she is a child of a sloth at the Tulsa Zoo, and she came to us.
Any other questions?
All right, so my question for you is, has anybody here ever had an animal of any type in your dome? Not on purpose, understood, okay. Do children count? Yes. Well, that would get back to the will it escape question. And hopefully not the will it poop on your carpet question. My hope is that getting an insight into what the zookeeper's perspective will empower you to have a more productive conversation when you first approach a community member that does work with animals. And of course, sloths make it easy, but the planetarium and the zoo are our #1 attendance drivers, and when you put the two of them together, that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And this is really helpful because we're like perfectly on schedule now. So we have to allow a couple minutes for passing back and forth between the rooms, but we can get set up by like a minute and a half and give you some extra time too, Emily. So Emily will be our next speaker. And we'll resume here in paper session 1B in just a minute with Concerts Under the Stars, Year 2. we're setting up, welcome to paper session 1B. For those of you who are not familiar with the paper, GLPA paper proceedings, each paper will have about 10 minutes. I'm going to let people start just a second early, and we have a wonderful timer system. You have 10 minutes to present your paper and 2 minutes for Q&A. I will give you a 2-minute warning before the end of your 10 minutes. With like a just hands up for 2. If you run all the way to the end of your 10 minutes, you get the bell. If you keep talking past that bell, no, you're perfect, Jeff. If you run past the bell, you are running into the rest of your talking time, and it will end at 12 minutes. Otherwise, if you stop then, you'll have 2 minutes for Q&A with the audience. While we're completing laptop setup, this will be the second paper on our run, Concerts Under the Stars, Year 2 by Emily Romy from the Roger B. Chaffee Planetarium at the Grand Rapids Public Museum. Take it away, Emily.
Okay, hi everybody. Today I'm going to talk to you about Concerts Under the Stars, which was a live music series that we started, thank you, in 2017. So this was the second year that we did it. I presented about the first year, last year at Pleiades. From the start, during its first year, it was a very successful live music series. All 4 shows that we did were totally sold out. And it was just a really interesting collaboration between live local music and artists in the planetarium. So we continued the series for a second season in 2018. So I'm just going to talk about kind of the changes that took place between the first and second year and kind of improvements we made, what we learned, etc., and then some plans for the future. This was a really nice quote by one of the musicians who performed with us, so I just wanted to include that. So same as the first year in 2017, we again invited local musicians from Grand Rapids to play a concert in the planetarium. We continued the series as like a winter-spring series, January through, it ended up being May. And this year, we increased the number of shows from 4 to what ended up being 6. These are our performers. During the first year of the series, we were a little bit more reserved in who we invited to perform because we didn't really know what to expect running sound. So the bands that we booked in 2017 were largely electronic, limited vocals. We were kind of concerned about feedback being an issue. But after the first year, we learned that that wasn't as much of a concern as we thought it might be. So we were a lot more risky. And we were able to book louder, larger bands with more musicians and more equipment. There were 5 scheduled performances, and I won't go into why there ended up being a 6th one. You can ask me about that at the hospitality suite if you are curious. But we ended up marketing that 6th additional show as like a by popular demand kind of thing, and despite it being kind of an unexpected addition, it was also very successful. Oh, it worked. Yeah. Okay. So one example of the, it's jumpy, whatever. One example of the more risky bands that we booked was this 10-piece ensemble. Their frontman approached me about performing his new album for the first time front to back as recorded, which meant inviting 9 of his friends to perform it with him. So I was really hesitant about this. I was like, I don't think you'll fit. But I saw that ensemble play a few songs from that album in a living room, much smaller than our planetarium. So, we ended up doing it. And this was actually my favorite show that we've done in the whole 2 years so far. It was a lot of fun. We don't have a huge amount of money dedicated to this series because it mostly breaks even, but we did invest in this life-saving piece of technology. John over here will attest to how convenient it has made our lives just having a snake. So we did spend a little bit of money to, again, improve the series and our efficiency in running sound by just getting a snake. It's great. We worked with 2 video artists this year. Nate Eisenga was a returning artist from the first year. He performed with us for all 4 shows in 2017. And his process for mixing video is like a live VJ kind of setup. So harvesting largely royalty-free video, mixing it live during the performance alongside the musicians using a MIDI controller. And then I worked with him a bit to adapt a lot of his rectangular content to work on the dome. So Nate worked with us for 2 shows in 2018. And then Megan Beatrix, I think is how you say her last name, she was the second local artist that we collaborated with this year. And in contrast to how Nate's process for putting video on the dome went, she actually created a video for every song in the set, and then that would just play alongside the performance, and then she did a lot more with our lighting system. So she did have a kind of live performative aspect to her show, but her workflow was a bit different. And for this particular show, she also styled the set. So it was her idea to bring in the lamps and the pillows, and it was real cozy. So she also worked with us twice in 2018. And the remaining 2 shows, we produced content ourselves, kind of combining some cloud content, some abstract effects that we had worked on from a previous light show production a few years ago, visuals generated using Magic, and royalty-free video content, as is tradition. Let's see, clicker. So ideally, we would work with an artist for every single show because it's a lot of time and effort to produce 45 minutes of interesting-looking abstract content in basically 2 weeks. And it's fun, it's a test of our skills, but it is a ton of commitment for our time and energy. So because Concerts Under the Stars was so successful its first year, we had a little bit more money to put toward advertising. Although most of our visibility was still through, Facebook events, word of mouth, and local news articles. We also partnered with a community radio station, which was our primary media sponsor for the series. And in addition to advertising the shows as just part of their regular announcements, they gave away, I think, 1 pair of tickets for every show at one of their radio shows. The posters were designed by 2 regional artists, one of which designed all of the posters the first year as a project for art school. So he had actually approached us looking for something to do, and we invited him again to design these posters. And he collaborated with a colleague of his to kind of create this more cohesive geometric style. Each poster visualizes the different musicians' sound, which is kind of cool. Cost structure stayed the same from 2017 to 2018. The advance price is really helpful, I think, because it gets people to purchase right away. And I think that's part of why the shows do sell out. And the cost structure might change in 2019. We're not sure yet. But speaking of which, all 6 shows were sold out or nearly sold out. The only one that wasn't was threatened by a snowstorm, and it was still at like 90% capacity. So what's notable is that our attendance on a regular day, this is like an average Saturday, members versus non-members is pretty much balanced. But Concerts Under the Stars brings in a whole different audience, which is great. I mean, that's kind of the goal in any alternative event that you do at your institution. So yeah, that's kind of a win for us. The structure of the show was the same as the first year. Doors opened at 6:30, show started around 7:30. We had a bar available with like beer, wine, and soda. And depending on the band and depending on the video artist, we would also schedule a couple of rehearsals in the planetarium leading up to their show. So it ended up being most helpful, I think, for the video artists because it gave them a chance to make sure what they produced would work, matched up with the set, and make any changes that they needed to make. But I think it's just generally helpful for everybody. The musicians had really good feedback for the fact that we did schedule these practices in the space. And it gave us an opportunity to run through everything and just get really familiar with their stage plot and audio setup. Plans for 2019. We're going back to our roots and decreasing back to 4 shows and ending before spring break, which is pretty important. It ended up conflicting both years just in the other activities that we had to commit to, and it's just too hard to focus on both big things. And in 2018, the series just ended up being so sprawling. It was like mid-May by the time it was over. So keeping it more contained to winter is a little bit more exclusive and seasonal then. We formed a committee for planning and choosing musicians, including inviting somebody from the community to give their input on the museum, like as a music venue within Grand Rapids. On the same note, we added an inquiry form on our website, so I stop hopefully receiving personal Facebook messages asking if this person's band can play in the planetarium, so I can just direct them to this handy link instead. The structure of each event will change slightly. Instead of one long set, we are planning to do 2 shorter sets with an intermission, so that allows people to, go back to the bar, use the bathroom without feeling like they're interrupting the show. And then it also makes the experience a little bit longer overall for the visitor. And ideally, again, we hope to collaborate with a video artist for all 4 shows to lessen staff time. And kind of a handy thing is that we had an AV upgrade elsewhere in the museum this year, so we do have some more gear to play with if needed. Mostly microphones. So I'm excited to see what happens in 2019. We're in the planning stages right now, so questions?
All right.
We do, yes. We do offer a stipend for musicians and video artists.
Were there any unique audio issues that you ran into for bands that maybe are using more of the guitar and bass and drums rather than synthesizers or things that would go straight into a board? I don't know if John could answer that better than me actually, but I wouldn't say like issues that we ran into, but I think we definitely saw what our limit is for like the type of band that will work really well. And one of the bands that played actually ended up bringing their own sound guy because he was more familiar with them, and that was really helpful, but it was like they were kind of pushing the volume of what sounds good in that space.
By the way, when you have a question, please wait for the mic because you are being streamed. Any other questions?
Hey, Emily.
Hi.
My question, I would like to do this kind of thing in our planetarium, but our administration's kind of like, their picture of when we do a concert is like a mosh pit and rowdy dudes and alcohol everywhere. Did you have any crowd control issues?
No, we didn't have any crowd control issues, and so one of my favorite things about this, and we're almost out of time, is that the museum...
You are out of time.
The museum as a music venue is a safe space, and it's not a bar. So it's just an experience to be had.
All right, thank you very much, Emily, for your wonderful paper. All right, we have a couple minutes to shift gears to our next presenter, who will be Anna Green. Or Anna Ver. So give you just a couple minutes to move over while we swap the AV.
I have to give this back to Joe.
Yes.
I don't know where he is.
Would you prefer a handheld microphone?
We're getting set up here. I just want to say bienvenue to session de papier. En bas. Where Anna Green will be talking about notre ciel.
I don't understand what you're saying at all.
My pronunciation's really bad.
It's okay. You can work on that.
I did for like 3 semesters.
It's all good. That's 3 semesters more than a lot of people.
So for the refresher, for anyone joining us for the paper, GLPA paper, the presenter will have 10 minutes plus an optional 2 minutes of Q&A, or they can just keep running over into those 2 minutes and fill them up. During Q&A, John and I will be running around with microphones because you are being streamed. So for the sake of people who are watching, who probably are watching, because actually people do watch our stream sessions, as well as the permanent recording, if you can wait for the microphone to come to you so we can record your question as well. I know that takes up time. And if you're ready, I can give you an extra minute right now.
Okay.
All right, Anna Green will be talking about Notre Ciel.
Donc, bonjour, madame, messieurs, et bienvenue. Aujourd'hui, je voudrais discuter notre séance en français, notre ciel, au planétarium James S. McDonald. So I'm not gonna make you listen to that bilingually the entire time. But I would like to talk to you today about our new show that we did last year, which is Notre Ciel, and it is a complete French immersion show. So my slides are going to be bilingual, so if you care to read the French, go right ahead. So I want to talk to you a little bit about why this came to be, and how, if you would like, you could do it in your own dome, and hopefully some things that I learned that can help you. So first of all, why do I have knowledge to talk about this? Because I decided in college that being a French major was a good idea. So that's me. I have a BA in French studies. I also minored in German. And then I was like, well, I don't know what to do with that. So I went back and I went to grad school. First, I actually got a K through 12 license, and then I went back to grad school and got a degree in museum studies. So all my favorite things kind of mushed together into this experience. So why would I want to bring a world language into the dome? Well, again, like I just told you, I majored in French and then I never did anything with it. So this was an opportunity to do that selfishly. But we actually have the opportunity to do something unique. So when it comes to second language learning or second language acquisition, the input is incredibly important. So a lot of times we do that classroom experience, and it's a lot of je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, and it's a lot of rote memorization depending on who your teacher is. But if you can get a good input, a good non-classroom input, that's going to help a lot. It's going to give you a good intake, and it's going to give students an opportunity to also hopefully produce better output. And this is going to hopefully get them to learn the language faster and be more confident with it as well. Also, the planetarium is a safe environment because, hey, nobody can see who's talking. So if you invite them to respond to you in French, they're gonna be more likely because their classmates aren't going to know who's talking, and they're not gonna have to be scared of mispronouncing things. This is also an opportunity to bring in a new audience. So in St. Louis, we actually have a French language immersion school. It's called the French School. And so we reached out to them, and I was like, hey, I actually have a license to teach French, so if you want to bring your kids and do this, that would be great. And they kind of freaked out a little bit, and we're like, yeah, let's do it. So we had this option to bring them in and give them this experience where they aren't being taught the language. And it gave us a partnership with the new school, and it gave us a new, I hate to say it, but a new revenue source. So this gave them an opportunity the second language learners a new opportunity, but also this helps for native speakers. So if you have native speakers who come to your dome, and maybe you're not in an area where there's a lot of French speakers. I just happen to be that weirdo that did French instead of Spanish. But if you have a Spanish speaker in your dome, this is also an excellent opportunity. And for the native speakers who come in, it can make them feel a lot more welcome. And also it gives you a chance to tap into a new part of the tourism industry. So if you have a Chamber of Commerce, you can chat with them and get them to help advance your new show. And we do actually periodically get large groups of visitors from Canada or France, usually with students who are hesitant to respond in English, so they have that option to shout out in French if they want to. Also, it's an opportunity to learn about new cultures. So some of you may know, I think I heard somebody talk about it a little bit yesterday. We know the Big Dipper is the Big Dipper, but in France they know it as La Casserole, and in Germany it's Der Wagen. So we all have different names for it, and then we can talk about how, thanks to the IAU, we have the standardized version, which is Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. So it's kind of cool just to see how we all see things differently, but we all can see the same thing as well, and bring in that cultural aspect too. So how do you make the show flow? So first of all, the emphasis should be on the language and using it, not talking about it, which in the planetarium, that's a lot easier for us to do than in a classroom, obviously. But it can be tempting, especially if you have those teacher skills and you do speak a foreign language, to want to just correct maybe what they're saying. Don't correct them. This is a safe space for them to explore the language. And the best part about this is that if you are modeling correct language for them, or your speaker is modeling correct language, they're more likely to start taking that input, and when they produce output that is incorrect, they're more likely to start self-correcting and fixing it. So again, the intake that they get is going to help them with more meaningful output, which is just the coolest thing when you hear one of them go, ah, and they correct themselves, and you can tell, even in the dark, that they're super proud. So that's the first thing. But really, you can just follow the science standards for your area. And again, focus on the content and use the normal speech patterns for the second language. Don't dumb it down for them. But also do keep in mind the standards for their level. Don't go teaching them, about title locking if they're in kindergarten and, that kind of thing. Keep it simple if they're in kindergarten, obviously. So that goes with know your audience, which really is rule number one for any show. You can also base it off your normal first or primary language show, and just kind of tweak it a little bit as needed. Beginner versus advanced vocabulary, if you can talk to the teacher beforehand, obviously that's going to be the best thing, because you're going to know where the students are. You can give some pre-activities to help bolster their vocabulary as well, because it does help. There's only so much capacity for processing, and if all of their processing is going to trying to comprehend what you're saying, they're not going to necessarily take in the astronomy, which is part of the goal. Have patience. You may need to give them extra wait time, and I know that's something that we may have a hard time with in the Dome, because we have X amount of time, particularly if you're in a public institution and you have to finish your show in 25 to 30 minutes and pump through new people through your Dome. But that wait time is critical for them. That gives them a moment to work out what they want to say and make them feel more confident in responding to you. So if you increase that wait time, that's going to help them a lot. And also, there's opportunity, even if you're not expecting it, to do bilingual shows. So you may have an audience that some of them don't speak French, but all of a sudden you get a group of kids in there that are learning French. And the teacher finds out at the last second, oh, you speak French, great, can we do that? So this is an opportunity to have everybody comprehend. You can invite the kids who are learning French, or the native speakers, whatever it may be, to respond to you in French, Spanish, whatever language you're using, and also your native English speakers to respond in the way that they're comfortable as well. And so We actually used that this year. Unfortunately, the class that came in 2017, they were not, the teacher felt that they weren't able to come again because she had a mixed class. There's also a Chinese school as well. And so she had kids who were learning Mandarin, and she had kids that were learning French. And so she felt she couldn't take them because of the kids learning Mandarin. But there was another teacher who wound up showing up, and we were able to do a bilingual show. And so the kids speaking Mandarin, obviously I couldn't help them with learning their second language, but they could respond in English. And the kids learning French got a chance to get that input and produce output. So there's still ways to work around and help everyone and get them the astronomy content, which is, of course, the main purpose of why we exist. So it's been met with a lot of positive feedback at our planetarium, both by native French-speaking groups and by students. Some big things to pay attention to. You should talk to your scheduling department. Make sure they know that there may be only one person on staff who speaks any foreign languages, and they need to make sure that you're going to be there when they schedule the school to come in. That's important. And also there needs to be proper notification from the box office. So for us as a public institution, if a school books the show, unless they book out the entire 200 seats, then we allow the public to come in. So the first time we actually did this show, we had a couple members of the public choose to come in. They didn't care it was in French, and they actually were one of those people, I'm sure you all heard them, oh yeah, I took a year of French in high school and I don't remember anything, but I could understand a lot of what you were saying. So that, of course, feels good. But you want to make sure, because you want them to come in and halfway through be like, I don't understand what's going on. Why can't I get a refund now? Unhappy people. So prepare a script in advance. And normally, I want to keep going. Normally, we, at least in the McDonald Planetarium, we don't read from scripts. We don't memorize scripts. We maybe have some bullet points that everybody has to hit for standards. And then we all do our own shows. However, what I discovered in preparing for this show is that despite having 9 years of French, in those 9 years, the only astronomy vocabulary that we ever learned was sun, moon, and stars. So I had to do a lot of research prior to ensure I was going to be modeling proper French grammar and vocabulary for them. So in the end, writing out a script in advance, just like if you were going into a classroom, I know when I was student teaching, they had us write scripts in advance for our lessons for the day. We never used them, but doing it in advance does help you to have that in your mind for also modeling proper language. Communicate with the teachers before the show so you can understand their level of comprehension. That cannot be said enough. Also, their comprehension of astronomy. Marketing. I know this is something that I think all of us struggle with for anything in our planetariums. But personal communication obviously is the best. Reaching out to the teacher, talking to them, getting to know them, and bringing them in. But you can use other methods if those work for you. You need to be flexible. So if need be, like I said, switch to bilingual from just complete immersion. Again, we had positive feedback. It's a new opportunity for both revenue and talking to teachers, and it helps you get new culture across. And it's for us, it's been a great opportunity. So I hope that if any of you had foreign language speakers, also if you're in a school with foreign language teachers or world language teachers, you can work with them and fly for them while they speak to their students, teaching them the astronomy. You can help them with the astronomy if they need it. I have 4 seconds left, so if you have questions, please come find me anytime today. And I'm going to give it to Dan.
All right, thank you, Anna Green. No time for questions, of course. And our next presenter will be Gary, if you're ready to set up, telling us about the domes of Western North Carolina. We'll have a couple minutes to swap over, let people move between sessions. So now you can get up and move, or you can sit back and be comfy.
Fun fact, that went faster when I did it bilingual.
Just a refresher on GLPA paper procedures. The presenter will have 10 minutes to talk and 2 minutes to either continue talking or to do Q&A. Presenters get a 2-minute warning, and then when they run over time, they get the bell. During the Q&A, should we have time, please wait for a microphone to arrive to you because we are streaming and recording the session. And if you talk into a microphone, we can record your question. Are you ready, Gary?
I am ready.
Well, in that case, I can give you an extra minute. So, everybody,
Je suis préparé.
please welcome Gary Lazick, who will be talking about the domes of Western North Carolina.
Thank you, Dan. Am I in the UP yet? I've been driving some 16 hours. I ought to be in the UP. I guess not yet. Madison County, Iowa is famous for its bridges, thanks to a novel, a film, and a Broadway play. Western North Carolina is famous for its mountains, waterfalls, and craft beer. In addition to these attractions, Western North Carolina also sports a brace of planetarium domes, albeit portable ones. Since relocating to Weaverville in 2016, I've been volunteering in each of these domes and keeping tabs on prospects for a third. Their stories follow. In the early 1960s, as part of its new communications network, NASA constructed a 200-acre facility with twin 26-meter radio telescopes near Rosman, North Carolina, in the Pisgah National Forest. Dedicated in 1963, the Rosman tracking station began playing a vital role in communication with piloted orbital spacecraft like the Gemini capsules. It even figured prominently in transmissions to and from the Apollo 11 spacecraft and the groundbreaking Apollo-Soyuz test project in 1975. By 1981, NASA no longer needed the Rosman facility and transferred it to the Department of Defense. The DoD used it to monitor transmissions to and from Russian spy satellites. To show the Russians that Rosman bore them no ill will, engineers painted a smiley face on one of the smaller radio dishes. In 1995, after the end of the Cold War, the DoD closed the station. The USDA Forest Service, which owned the land, dictated that the DoD remove or bury all of the structures at Rosman and return the area to its natural state. Don Klein, a retired telecommunications engineer and meteorite collector, intervened. He traded some land he owned to the Forest Service in exchange for the Rosman property, and created the public nonprofit Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute, PERI. Today, PERI operates and maintains the twin 26-meter radio telescopes, along with several smaller ones, automated optical telescopes on a high ridge, a nature center with an attached sky deck for use by portable telescopes, an extensive exhibit area with space artifacts and a large collection of minerals and meteorites, and most recently a small restaurant and set of cabins for overnight stay. One of PERI's buildings houses Adventure Dome, a 22-foot inflatable Starlab dome. Inside, a Digitalis Digitarium Zeta Pro has replaced the earlier Starlab projector. Public and student visitors can enjoy live tours of the current evening sky. I present shows and help with telescope viewing several times a month. In 1960, the mineral collection of retired engineer and bank president Burnham S. Colburn formed the nucleus of a gem and mineral museum. After relocating in 1972, the museum became the independent nonprofit Colburn Gem and Mineral Museum. In July 1992, the museum moved to the Pack Place Arts and Science Center and rebranded itself 10 years later as the Colburn Earth Science Museum to reflect a broader mission. It became a popular destination for school field trips. The need for more space, the desire for an even broader mission, and the growing untenability of the Pack Place location conspired to transform the museum into the Asheville Museum of Science, AMOS. The museum moved into its current facility in the Wells Fargo building in 2016. New and old exhibits include a full-sized dinosaur skeleton, the Colburn Hall of Minerals, an Illuminati geodome panorama for simulated space travel, an interactive Terra box, a forest gym, and an interactive model of the French Broad River. On Sunday afternoons, I become Star Guy, inflate a 4-meter digitalis dome into the Star Dome, and present live sky tours using a classic Starlab projector. To tell the truth, although I like the versatility of the Digitarium Zeta Pro at Perry, I much prefer the realism of the Starlab Starfield at Amos. The system also travels to schools and day camps. In 1994, a county landfill near Burnsville in western North Carolina closed. County leaders sought to use the space as well as the landfill gases. 5 years later, the former landfill reopened as Energy Exchange. Natural gas drawn from the landfill provided fuel for such arts as glass blowing and ceramics. Solar panels provided heat for a greenhouse, as well as electricity for the buildings. After a decade of operation, the methane supply proved too unreliable for the artist, and Energy Exchange closed. One of its partners, Malin Community College, took over the site and began developing it as an earth-to-sky park. The dark night skies over the location led them to apply for and receive designation as a dark sky park from the International Dark Sky Association. Recently, private donors Warren and Larissa Baer provided funding for the Baer Dark Sky Observatory above the park. It opened in spring 2017. The observatory features a 34-inch f3.6 star structure Newtonian telescope on a Dobsonian mount, the so-called SAM-scope. College staff and volunteers from the Blue Ridge Astronomical Society provide public observing throughout the year. Each of the facilities I have profiled has undergone profound transformation and is researching prospects for further development. Perry is considering the construction of a new building to serve as its museum and possibly to house a permanent planetarium. Amos is considering expanding their footprint should Wells Fargo vacate the building, possibly including a permanent planetarium. Finally, Malin Community College is considering the construction of a permanent 63-seat planetarium within one of the Earth to Sky Park buildings. I am monitoring each of these prospects, and I will let you know via the GLPA newsletter if any of them begin to take shape. Questions? Comments?
You get a ton of time for questions, too,
I know,
Gary.
I know.
So, yeah. Any questions from the crowd?
So I'm trying to understand which domes are which. So you have the Adventure Dome, which is a 22-foot Starlab dome.
At Perry in
but with a
Rosman.
digitalis projector.
Right.
What's the model of the projector?
It's the Zeta Pro.
Zeta Pro. And
Yeah.
then at Asheville, you have the 4-meter
Digitalis
digitalis
dome.
dome with a Starlab projector.
It's sort of a smorgasbord of planetarium equipment. Yeah, and we have the classical Starlab projector.
Cool. Is that a fiber arc or a regular?
Regular.
Regular, okay. Yeah, I
Still
like that
has a heck of a star field.
Yeah, thanks.
Going once, going twice. If there are no questions, I'd like to thank Gary for his presentation.
Thank you.
We are now ahead of schedule, but because the goal is to stay in synchronization with the other room, Sue has a great big long time to set up, and everyone else can just sit back, relax, get some water, might be some snacks around, and we'll resume here in just under 5 minutes.
I know. It's the first time I've ever come up short.
I think it's the first time anyone in Clip has ever come up short.
Thank you.
want the clip-on one?
No, would you do the clip-on one and I'll...
I don't want the clip-on. Here it is. So if you're going to use handhelds, I would both use handhelds because the clip-on is quieter than the handhelds. So this way you'll be matched in volume.
Sarah, you're in the right
It's
place.
so loud, nobody can handle it. All right, good. So it's on. It's just on.
Is there a chance to dim the lights for just a minute so we can show my control? Funny thing.
During the so then like in the middle, it's like
If you're just joining us, we are a little bit ahead of schedule, so we'll get started here in about 2 to 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Do you have your phone?
I don't have one. Sorry, I'm faking. It's gonna fit right in with mine. A little flashlight.
I am so torn about our new, like our rebranding, because I really hate our new logo. I really like the color palette. Because it's not blast you in the face target red.
But you don't like the.
No, it's generic and boring, and I swear somebody else already has that as their logo, except that it's attached just because they don't care. It took away all of the, well, all the culture of the science and logo. And I get it, it's hip and cool for the kids, but
Sometimes that's not the best view.
so it's, where's my, oh, it's a wrong version of it now.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't the strongest in chemistry. Physics and biology were my jams.
It's gonna be the end of the last session in just 5 minutes.
Other than math.
Then it's 3 minutes.
At least I'll put their full.
I'm not supposed to. I'm just that generous.
We both need.
I won't need.
Okay.
So,
If you're just joining us, we're a little bit ahead of schedule in this room, so we're going to wait just a couple minutes before we get started.
yeah, don't shine at your fake. Try it over here. Not much. Maybe both of them.
No. Because
That's our problem.
if what happens?
Show him.
There are 6 LEDs in there.
Oh.
You get each star is a star cluster of 6.
Right.
It's a Pleiades projector. For those of you just joining us in paper session 1B, we're just a little bit ahead of schedule. GLPA paper procedures are each presenter has 10 minutes to present. They will get a 2-minute gentle warning. If they go over 10 minutes, mess with tell, they get the bell. At which point they will have 2 minutes to either continue talking or 2 minutes for Q&A with the audience. If you would like to ask a question during Q&A, please raise your hand so we can bring the microphone to you because you are being streamed and recorded, and that way people will be able to hear your question. So we'll get going momentarily. 1 minute, so people still have time to stay in sync.
Thank you for not ringing the bell during my session, by the way. You know me well. Well, and like the first time when you did it during
unless it was Emily's, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have major anxiety if that happens.
That's why she kept talking faster, faster, faster.
Well, and I was keeping an eye on my time because I did not want the bell to happen. It's nice. Yeah, you still need the person to be like, stop.
Also, this is a very easy group to moderate. You guys are very good at self-regulation. So we can start whenever you're ready, Sue. Yes. Okay, everybody. Sue Batson is here to talk to us about the dark side of constellation storytelling.
Thank you.
With Buck.
Okay, I was going to say with Buck. So I'll start. Hi, I'm Sue. I'm a planetarian. I've retired a couple of years ago, and I can't really get that out of my system. I'm still a planetarian, and I don't have a planetarium. I do have a portable dome. I've moved to a rural community. The kids are really good at seeing the sky. I'm starting to get into the schools and talk to the teachers. I don't have a projector. So next week, and I had planned to have this finished before this conference, but it turns out, for reasons that you'll understand later, this is going to be next week that the lesson is going to happen. But we are going to the school with the planetarium and no stars. So we decided, we talked to the teacher that we hooked up with I would call her a librarian, but I think she's a information technology specialist. I believe that's her title. So she sees the kids in all grades in the elementary school, K through K1?
It's her schools are 1st through 5th.
Okay, 1 through 5.
And as a librarian, she gets to see the kids once every 2 weeks. And her schedule is based on having to travel to different schools, different elementary schools, and it's based on allowing the grade homeroom teachers to have prep time. So she gets one class of each grade. There's 2 classes in each grade. One class of each grade on one day, and then the next week she gets the other class of each grade. So she doesn't get to do like first grade. She doesn't get to do 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. It's kind of a random whatever the principal works out so that the homeroom teachers get their prep time. So it's kind of difficult for her, and it's taking much longer for this project to grow than we thought. Because we thought, well, 1 week, 2 weeks she would do this stuff, and then we would come in. Well, 2 weeks really means 4 weeks, and it means that when we go in, we have to go in for 2 weeks.
So that sets up an interesting schedule for us, and so we have challenges all around with our technology challenges and with the schedule challenges. So what we ended up with is we are going to do constellation stories, which the kids all love. We are going to allow the kids to do some creating themselves. She's going to group them into groups of 4, and each group of 4 is going to receive a constellation projector to actually create. And the 5th grade class, I believe, is going to create the projectors, and then everybody's going to use them. So I gave her a bunch of oatmeal boxes. I emailed her some templates that I had drawn constellations and then flipped them and then photographed them, scanned them, and sent them to her. So she's got them printed out, and what the kids are going to do is tape them to the top of the box, or actually the bottom of the box, and then poke holes in it, which she thought her older kids would be better at poking holes than the little kids. And then each group is going to use them. I came up with 8 templates for them, and the 8 templates are going to be constellation. They're actually real constellations with a couple extra stars. I added some of the dimmer stars in, or some of the ones that were outside the borders of that constellation. And I didn't tell them what they were. In fact, I didn't tell her what they were, because teachers sometimes give away those things to the kids. So they're going to have a bunch of stars that they're projecting through a box. And then, do you want to talk about how we make these, and you want to show them this?
Sure. If you haven't ever done this is a fun thing to do with kids. And in the old days, you had your big 4-cell flashlight, and you'd put it in here. And today we now have LED lights, and I found out that there are some challenges for this.
We tweaked the lights. Okay, so this was our first shot.
My first shot was, here's a really nice bright flashlight. I thought, wow, that'll work really well. However, it turns out, if I can get this bright enough to shine.
Can we see them at all?
Like it's hard in a not dark room, but do you see that since the flashlight is a cluster of lights, every star is a cluster of stars.
So this is a really great physics lesson, but we're not teaching diffraction right now, so that's not going to work. So that box of flashlights I gave her, I think I'm going to have to reclaim them and try again, perhaps a visit to a dollar store or something.
I found that cell phone works really well. These are all binaries, but that worked out a little bit better. And so somebody graciously gave us a bright flashlight that has a single light in it, but it still doesn't cover all the stars. So yeah.
Yep. So I think it's a trip to the dollar store to buy the old-fashioned battery with the D cells, and we'll be all set with that, because those probably $1 a piece. I can get those, and we'll be doing that, I guess, before the end of the week. Okay, so we have these projectors, and the kids are going to make them. Once they do that, they're going to see their stars. And like I said, I cheated and added a couple extra stars and didn't tell them what they were. So they have to connect the stars into some kind of a constellation and write a constellation myth. So this is sort of helping them with their writing requirements. The myth has to have dialogue in it. So that's one of the things that the librarian wanted. So the myth with the dialogue. Now we have 4 kids in the team. One kid is going to, when we visit with the Planetarium Dome, we're going to set it up in the gymnasium in the school, and they're going to come in. Each group of kids is going to shine their flashlight through their projector. They're going to, one person shines the light and keeps the stars up on the sky or wherever they want them. One person is going to take the laser pointer and connect the stars. They're going to practice this before we get there. And then one person is going to tell the story, and one person is going to do the dialogue. So we have a role for each kid. That's particularly good when you're talking about younger children, to give them specific roles to do. So they're going to do that. I think maybe a minute or two for them to tell their story, because they're not going to be long stories. And then the librarian is going to make sure of that. And then I will tell them the Greek-Roman story that goes with that, and point out, these are the stars that go with the standard constellation that you're looking at. And then I'm going to try to have enough time to tell them a second story from a different culture using the same stars. So the constellations I chose, specifically, I happen to know stories that are from varied cultures that will go with those. So all in all, it's going to be, I think, a good visit. We're going to end up going for...
We go for 2 days a week for 2 weeks, because there's 2 different schools that are trying this. The first and second graders, we're just going to do some fun stuff with them in the dome. It'll be a dark place, and we'll talk about sun and moon and things like that. The third, fourth, and fifth graders will bring their own stories, and we'll see how that goes. And like we said, we thought this was going to be finished by now, but I guess you'll have to come back next year, and we'll tell you how it turns out.
So something to do when you have nothing. That's basically what we're doing. Okay, that's it. We're done. Any questions?
And you have a lot of minutes for questions, so if anyone has a question, shoot your hand up. All right. I know you're up front, Sue, but technically, want to go first.
How did you come up with this idea?
How did we come up with this idea? Well, we looked at our resources and we said, well, the dome is really cool. The portable dome is really cool, and kids will like it. and we wanted to become active in this new school, in this new place we moved to. And we looked at what we had and we said, well, this is all we can do. And the oatmeal box projectors, this is a super old idea that we were doing, oh my, when I was in elementary school, people were doing that. And I remember making these when I was 8 years old or whatever.
And then
What kind of dome do you have?
The dome is a 6-meter, I don't know, you have to ask John Hare, I bought it from him. It's,
Is it a digital projection screen type thing, or is it an old Star Lab, or? It's black?
it's a big black,
Oh, could
Yeah,
be an
that's-
Apollo. Okay. And where did you get all your oatmeal boxes? Do you eat a lot of oatmeal?
I do eat a lot of oatmeal.
all right, any more questions? Unless you have anything else to say, Sue and Buck, thank you very much for your time and your presentation.
Okay, thank you.
We now remain ahead of schedule over here, so we're going to wait a few minutes for the changeover before our next series of presenters from the Adler Planetarium, whose names I notice are not alphabetized, which really bugs me. So it will be Nick Lake, Sarah Smale, and Mark Subarao.
HDMI. To what? It's in the web browser here. Oh, that one. Laptop one.
If you're just joining us from the other side, we're a little bit ahead of schedule here, and our next presenters are wrapping up with their setup. It will be Sky Show Summer Camps with Nick Lake, Sarah Smale, and Mark Subarao from the Adler Planetarium. While everyone's getting comfy, just my last refresher of the day. GLPA paper sessions are 10 minutes long. Presenters will receive a 2-minute gentle warning and a 1-minute danger or a 0 minutes danger warning, at which point they will have 2 minutes to either continue talking or for Q&A. If you have a question during Q&A, please wait for a microphone to arrive at your location to ask it, because you are being streamed and recorded, and that way people out in cyberspace can hear you talking. Or in the future when we watch the recording. Okay, with that, we will start our final paper of session 1B, Sky Show Summer Camps with Nick Lake, Zara Smale, and Mark Subarow from the Adler Planetarium.
Good morning. So I run our summer camp program, and we've done 2 years of this Sky Show summer camp, and it is my very favorite. There's a lot of nonprofit and for-profit competition in Chicago. So to find Adler's place within that market, we really focus in on those really unique, can't do it anywhere else in the city experiences, and we have the best dome. So we do our Tech Camp Sky Show. It's a 1 week, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., 16 kids entering 6th through 8th grades. We've got 3 main goals for the week. It's that the campers learn and do all aspects. Whether they love presenting or not, they're gonna speak. Whether they love programming or not, they're gonna get their hands on the computer. They get to interact with the experts, and they get behind the scenes access, which is very coveted by the parents in particular. And each group is going to create a final product that is unique and watchable. Not perfect, watchable. I'll talk a little about how we make this camp work, and then I'll turn it over to Nick and Mark to talk about how they bring their expertise to the camp. You can see our schedule here. It is pretty intense. We've hit on a few things that ensure that at the end of it, we've got shows that are ready to go and participants who are confident and proud of their work. First, we're really clear about expectations and the timeline. We try to give the campers just as much autonomy as they are able to handle. And we let them decide, oh, I need a break now. No, we really need to be focusing on this now. Some groups are great at it. Some need a little more structure, and we provide that. Second, this is camp. Sometimes a kid's late. Sometimes they don't come at all. That is one of the big reasons why every participant learns and does every part. Imagine if on midweek, Wednesday, our primary programmer doesn't come in. We'd be in some trouble. So we make sure that they all can do everything. In terms of how we divide up that work, we like no more than about 5 kids per group. Otherwise, there's just not enough hands-on time for each child. And no more than 3, otherwise they're really struggling to get their work done. Third, again, this is camp. The kids are on summer break. They are there to have fun. So we make sure to break up the day. We do a long lunch. We build in time for really active games. We either visit an exhibit or see a show every day. And we make room for other fun activities, whether scheduled or unscheduled, throughout the day. That really reduces the pressure on them. This can be a high-pressure situation for them, so this reduces the pressure, makes things a little lighter for them, keeps it fun. Fourth, testing in a dome space is essential. Let's see if I can get one more there. Whether that is your standard dome, whether you have a mini dome or a portable, some sort of domed space where they can see the show as it's going to be is essential. Middle schoolers are not abstract thinkers. They see it in their little circle view on the laptop screen, and they cannot imagine what that's going to look like up on the dome. Truth be told, neither can I. I am not good at that. So the more practice you can get, the better. Otherwise, you get shows like that. Nobody likes to watch a show like this. So the more testing you've got, just the better. Finally, as in just about every single thing involving a guest interaction, you live and die by your staff. In addition to our outstanding experts, we keep an instructor, a counselor, and a volunteer in the room all the time. They are sort of the backbone. They are always present. They keep things on track. And they manage those camper needs, the endless bathroom trips, all of that. And then they can pinch hit for Nick and Mark when they can't be in the room. Their job is basically to see that big picture and ensure that everybody is moving towards Friday morning when they present. And of course, we have the content experts, Nick and Mark. We could train the instructor and counselor sufficiently to do the content, but we really think that adding that expert portion is really, really beneficial. It really adds something to the final program.
Cool. Yeah. So my role in the week is kind of doing what I do with our operators is training them up to be public speakers and being comfortable in front of a crowd. The timeline of the week certainly works against that in some ways. It's a very quick timeline. So Friday morning is when they're presenting to friends and family. So keeping them on schedule and really setting the expectations for what these presentations are and are not at the beginning of the week. We shouldn't expect perfection out of these shows. We want the kids to have something that they're comfortable with, that they have come up with, topics and content as well. So it's important that, if a group is maybe trying to find the coolest image they can and they're just sort of stuck on that for an hour or something, or trying to get something perfect, to encourage them to recognize that, it might not be exactly what you want, but let's move on. Let's get to the other things like script writing and preparing your presentation. That'll be especially important on Friday morning. So starting Wednesday, we lead the campers in a series of public speaking improv games. We have a few of these, which I can talk to you more in detail on, but one in particular, we have just a stack of like 100 index cards, and each one has a random noun on it. And so a camper gets 4 or 5 of these, has to stand up in front of their peers and tell a story that incorporates all of those words in a coherent narrative and hopefully concise narrative as well. So this gets them kind of out of their minds a little bit. They're able to just be up there talking to their peers, goofing off a little bit, telling a funny story, and hopefully in some ways forgetting that they're doing public speaking at that point. And hopefully that concise, coherent narrative and storytelling finds its way into their script writing, which they're doing at that point as well. They're also given 2 chances to practice their shows in the Granger Theater. That's on Wednesday and Thursday mornings. So really the difference between Wednesday into Thursday and Thursday into the final presentation is just amazing. They come out of those with a little bit of peer feedback, hopefully constructive feedback. So they've got a whole list of things that they're going to be working on for the next few hours coming out of that. And the pressure leading up to Friday, I think, keeps them moving along as well, so it works out pretty well. That is one of the things that we've thought about, is making this a 2-week camp, which would obviously increase costs, but the ability to kind of get to where we are on Friday and then go beyond that with the next week would really be pretty amazing. So Mark's now going to talk about our choice of Worldwide Telescope, particularly for this camp.
I have my own mic. So let's talk a little bit about the technology. So if you think about it, it's hard to make a planetarium show. And then the idea of taking middle schoolers, giving them a couple of days, and having them build a show seems a little insane. And there are a couple of things that enable this process. One of which is Worldwide Telescope. So one of the inspirations was a project that had been done by the American Museum of Natural History called, I forget exactly, the Digital Flight School or Flight Academy or something, where they trained up high school students over the course of, I think initially over the course of a summer, and they've shortened that now. But Worldwide Telescope enables you to put things together much faster than most of the traditional planetarium software. So here you can actually see the interface that the students are working in. You see them working in the dome mode. This is one of the shows that was put together by Girl Power Ravioli, one of the teams. But it's basically this slideshow thing. At its simplest, you just fly to one spot, you click slideshow, then you fly to the next spot, you click that, and it goes from place to place. And then you can get fancier with transitions and animations and whatnot. But you can start doing things really fast. So we have basically an hour session with them explaining the software, but they're going with it and they're running really fast. So that's great. A couple of other things is You can play back this content in a couple of different ways. You can play it directly in your dome. We actually initially just tested the laptop, taking in the fisheye, low-resolution fisheye image and projecting that on our Digistar system. If you have it set up in your dome, you can run Worldwide Telescope directly. But if you don't have it set up, you can also render to files. And we actually, one of the harder parts technically is we've been doing that last year. So we actually freeze their content Thursday afternoon, we render it out, we encode it, and then we play it back for their parents Friday morning, which is a bit of a challenge. Here you see one of the nice projects that did, actually I'm always amazed at how engaged these kids are. So this group came in really wanting to tell the story about light pollution, and the focus was pretty unbelievable. But what really makes this work is just the power of that Friday morning when their friends and family come and watch that show on the big dome. And it's pretty incredible. And the idea that, what they created is shown there. And the big thing is, I think the takeaway that we like for you is that this is really something you should try and do. It's not as hard as it may seem. It's a powerful experience for the kids. They learn about science and astronomy. They learn about public speaking. They learn about writing. All kinds of other things that I forget. Oh, the technology. And it's a great experience for their family who get to see their children up on the big stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, Sarah, and Nick. Any questions? All right, John's going to run it over to you, Doctor.
I was just wondering if you could give us some examples of the subject matter for some of these shows and how the kids come up with their ideas for it.
That was one of our big questions was, do we need to lead them towards some subjects, or are they going to figure it out? I kind of refer to these camp kids as like pod children. They come in just like, we're ready, we're doing the thing. They come in with some really solid ideas. We've only done it for 2 years. Both years we've had a constellations show, and it tends to be the girls who gravitate towards that, liking the story aspect. Our light pollution one was one where that child has been working with the Astronomical Society in Chicago and is super high into light pollution interests. So he came in like, this is what we are doing. Basically, day one, we go, okay, what are you interested in? Oh, cool, that sounds a lot like this kid. Go talk to them. And by lunchtime on Monday, we've got some ideas.
Always a black hole show.
Always a black hole show, yeah. Black holes are cool.
And this will be our last question from Alex Mack.
Is this grant funded, or do you actually charge the kids? And if so, how much?
Good question. Yeah, currently it is a charged program. We are looking into ways to underwrite it so that we can bring some equity and bring in kids from other parts of the city rather than just those who can pay. This is a $325 camp. Which is actually the lower tier for Chicago. That's in market value, that's actually towards the bottom for a week-long camp.
And with that, time is up. Thank you again to Nick, Sarah, and Mark. And that concludes our first paper session of GLPA.